Morning all and welcome back once again to I Like Watches. I was enjoying wearing my Grand Seiko SBGA 373 the other day, and then it occurred to me, I've owned this watch now for over 5 years and it has been a roller coaster of a journey. I'm not exaggerating. Some incredible highs, but also some gut-wrenching lows as well. And I think having owned this watch for 5 years, I'm now in a pretty good position to share with you ownership experience, basically. So in this video, I'm going to talk about the bad. I'm also going to talk about the good. Obviously, I'm going to share with you my overall experience of owning this watch, and I also sent it back to Grand Seiko in Japan a little while ago for a service and a refurbishment. So I'm going to talk about that. Basically, if you're considering owning a Grand Seiko, especially a spring drive one like this, you're going to want to stick around. They are gorgeous, but are they all they're cracked up to be? So how did I end up with this gorgeous Grand Seiko SBGA 373 spring drive? Well, before I started this watch review channel, I had a proper job, you know, a normal job that pays a salary every month. And I took a little trip to Bluewater, a fantastic shopping centre east of London. And there's a jewellers in there that sells Grand Seiko watches. And I took a trip specifically to go and have a look at the snowflake dial titanium watch that everybody raves about. And while I was walking into the shop to have a look at that watch, this thing caught my eye. I'm sure it has something to do with the lighting in jewelers. Have you ever noticed how, well, all watches look incredible in jewelers? Whenever I go to Francis and Gay in Coventry, I'm just salivating because all the watches look fantastic. And honestly, I did a double take. I walked in there to have a look at that snowflake dial, but I said, any chance I could have a look at that 373 as well? And they said, yes, of course, no problem. I sat down, I had a look at the snowflake watch, and I instantly put it down. I don't know, I just wasn't that fussed about it. I picked up this watch and I couldn't take my eyes off it. I was in there for probably half an hour. I left, I went and got a coffee, I came back, I had another look at the watch. I was to and fro, as you do when you're close to spending that sort of money. And then I started to have a chat with them about price, and they gave me 10% off pretty quickly, to be honest. So I think you can probably go into most Grand Seiko ADs and ask for 10% off. I think that's something that you'll almost certainly get. And I walked out the shop with this, and honestly, that was one of the highs. Just incredible. I didn't stop wearing it for weeks, if not months and months actually. I wore it every day, and of course, nobody knows what you're wearing. Nobody else appreciated it. I was working in an office and I felt like $1 million, but it didn't bother me that no one was looking at the watch or commenting on it. Of course, if it had been a Rolex Submariner, there would have been people salivating all over it. But yeah, I mean, you don't buy a Grand Seiko for other people to notice. So that is something to bear in mind. If you want to buy an incredible watch for other people to notice, only watch enthusiasts are going to ever notice a Grand Seiko. And there were none of them in my office job or in the office where I worked. So yeah, I was wearing it for me, but it didn't bother me, of course, until I got into a lift one day and just knocked it on the railing. Oh man, my heart broke. I almost cried. I put a scratch on the Zaratsu polished bezel, and honestly, oh man, I was almost on the floor in tears. It killed me. And that is unfortunately one of the downsides to owning a Grand Seiko. When you get them, they look incredible. They really, really do. But you have to be prepared for them to get scratched and marked and knocked. And I just wasn't prepared for it, I don't think. And yeah, I struggled to recover after that, because every time I looked at the watch, I just kept seeing this scratch. Of course, that is nothing compared to what happened shortly afterwards when I started my watch review channel. And I thought it would be a good idea to take this watch and a Grand Chin to my local pub and just chat with some randoms, just people I'd never met before, show them both watches, get their opinions and ask them which one they thought was the expensive one. And of course, when you hand your watches to people who have been drinking in a pub, you've got to expect anything to happen. And sadly, some drunken fool, he wasn't even that drunk to be honest, he'd probably only had a couple of drinks, thought he'd bang the two watches together. Well, if you thought the damage that I'd caused from knocking it in the lift was bad, man, that thing was battered. That Grand Chin just tore through the side of the Grand Seiko. I don't think I've got any pictures, sadly, but yeah, put some pretty substantial damage on the side of it, and that was the biggest low, absolutely. So when I say you've got to be prepared to get knocks and bumps on your Grand Seiko, maybe not quite like that or in that manner, because I was an idiot. What was I thinking? I paid the ultimate price, but yeah, I basically stopped wearing it after that. I just couldn't wear it. I genuinely felt gut-wrenchingly sick whenever I looked at it. I just wasn't prepared for that watch to get that damaged. So yeah, for probably 2-3 years or so, I hardly wore it. But then I thought, I've got to do something about this. So I sent it off to Japan. I bit the bullet. I sent it off for a service and a refurbishment, and it has come back looking, well, not as good as new, but they've done a decent job. I'll show you the watch in really close detail at the end of the video. But yeah, I'm back to wearing it now, which is a relief. I'm back to enjoying it as well. I don't feel sick every time I see it. I look forward to putting it on. But sadly, I can't always wear it. Why can't I always wear it, I hear you ask? Well, I'm now going to talk about the negatives of owning a Grand Seiko, and more specifically this one, I think, because they've not given me any micro adjustment other than some slightly smaller links, I think it is. And so in certain combinations, you can get this watch to fit your wrist perfectly. The downside is, if you are having a slightly larger or smaller wrist day, adjusting the length just fractionally is a royal pain in the backside. I'm not exaggerating. It is a pain because they have given you two tiny screws for each link, and then a center pin that sort of runs through the links to connect them together. And honestly, those screws are so small. At one point, I resized it to wear it, and I dropped one of those screws on the floor, and honestly, I was there for half an hour. And that's made me afraid to adjust the size. So now if I want to wear it and I just think it's too tight to wear, I don't even consider adjusting the length. I just put it back in the watch box, pick up another watch, and then I just hope the next time I want to wear it, my wrist is either a little bit smaller or a little bit fatter. So yeah, that is a massive downside to this watch. I do have spring bar tools everywhere, you know, they're all over the place. So if I had some sort of spring bar adjustment capability, I could just, you know, lengthen it, shorten it a little bit, and then almost be able to wear it whenever I want. But yeah, that lack of ability to adjust it fairly quickly ruins the ownership for me to some degree. It means I'm not always able to wear it, and it's, well, I've been wearing it now for an hour or so this morning, and it is starting to feel tight. Yeah, it was fine on my wrist this morning, but it's starting to swell up, I think, a little bit, my wrist, as it does do throughout the course of the day. And yeah, it is starting to get a little bit tight. And I'm now just looking at my list of bad, and I think in some way or other, I've sort of covered them, because my list of bad consists of no micro adjustment, which obviously I've talked about, the tiny screws in the bracelet. Honestly, it's ridiculous. The lady in the shop when I bought it couldn't resize it. In the end, I just said, don't bother, you're going to end up scratching it. I'll take it home and resize it myself. And yeah, she openly admitted, I just can't get these screws back in. I was like, just put it all in the box, leave it. I don't want you to struggle with it and start scratching it up. I'll do it at home. So yeah, the tiny screws, nightmare, prone to scratches and dents. I mean, these things are so beautifully finished. When you buy them, they look incredible, but you really must be someone who is prepared to knock it, scratch it, and have it not looking perfect if you want to wear it, or if you're going to wear it fairly regularly. And also, no one else is going to appreciate what you're owning. If you're going to buy a Grand Seiko like this, be prepared for no one else to understand what you're wearing. You'll be buying it for you and you only to enjoy. But there is an upside to that, of course. You're less likely to get mugged for your watch, because they'll probably look at your wrist and go, he's only got a Seiko, so we'll leave it. And the last negative on my list is, of course, if you want to service it and have it refurbished by Seiko, they are going to send it back to Japan, and it's going to be a couple of months at least. And it's not going to be, well, it wasn't crazy money, actually. I had a full refurbishment, steel refurbishment, bracelet and case, completely refinished. And don't forget, there was some fairly substantial damage on the watch. And I had a proper service, and it was £700. Look, I know it is a lot of money, but when you consider who it is that's doing the work, where it's got to go, and yeah, you know, the watch that they're handling, and the level of finishing that they've managed to achieve, you know, it's okay. I don't like handing over £700, but I was prepared to do it. And I think it was worth it because I am now thoroughly enjoying owning this watch. And you should do, because there are lots, you should enjoy owning it, I mean, because there are lots of positives. I mean, just look at these things. They're unbelievable. Grand Seiko watches look incredible. If you like your steel finishing and you want an impeccably finished watch, there are other companies out there equal to and potentially even better than Grand Seiko, but for the money, they are really, really good value for money. I think in terms of, you know, sort of luxury premium watch, especially the spring drive movements. The spring drive movements are incredible. It's another benefit or bonus or strength, if you like, of these watches. Yes, spring drive movements, they are incredible. In this video, I'm not going to go into spring drive movements because that's not the purpose of this video. There's lots of videos out there explaining spring drive movements, but I just love that super smooth sweep of the second hand. And I also love when there's no power in the watch. I know this is a bit of a random thing. You start to wind up the crown. The crown action, by the way, is just heavenly. I went for a beer with a couple of friends and yeah, they were having a fiddle with the Grand Seiko and they said exactly the same thing. The crown action on these things, the sound just is incredible, absolutely. But yeah, what I was saying was when you wind up the watch for the first time, you know, after a few days, the second hand moves really, really quickly. And then, of course, the brakes are put on and yeah, it slows right down to its correct speed. And I don't know, I just like watching that. So yeah, incredible finishing, lovely crown action, safe to wear because, well, relatively safe to wear because no one else is going to really understand what you're wearing. But really, the reason I bought this watch is because of how it looks. Honestly, the double take I did when I walked into that jeweler's was massive. I literally did the most exaggerated double take you have ever seen, and I couldn't take my eyes off it. Honestly, yeah, when I was in that jeweler's, I literally fell in love. And even now, I'll just look at it in the watch box. It is stunning. I love, love, love champagne sunburst dials. And the applied indices and the hands on this thing, just incredible. The finishing, let's move on now and talk about the servicing and the sort of refinishing that Seiko did. The service, not really much to say there. It was running perfectly when I sent it to them. I only had it serviced and the movement serviced because, well, it was going to Japan anyway. I'd owned it for 3 or 4 years and I think they recommend having it serviced every 5 years. So I thought, let's just get it serviced anyway. I think it was £300 or so for the actual movement service. So not much really there to talk about, but the refinishing, they did a full refurbishment and they did have to remove, I suspect, quite a bit of steel because some of the dents on the bezel, for example, and that bezel is sort of super crisp and angular and there's a sort of fairly sharp corner around the edge of it. So I think they had to remove a fair amount of steel and they've managed to get it back to a pretty decent sort of level. I don't think the finishing that they've managed to achieve with the refurbishment is anywhere close to what it was when it was new. I just think factory finish is definitely best. But yeah, they've done a really, really nice job. I just don't think it's, yeah, as good as it was when I bought it. And I have to say, the finishing overall on the bracelet and the clasp is, I wouldn't say disappointing, but it isn't anything special. The polishing on the flat surfaces on the case, and when it was new, they were mirror-like, just incredible, probably the best I've ever seen. And of course, the corners, the brushing, all that sort of stuff, really, really nice. But yeah, their bracelet finishing is just fairly mediocre. And in fact, I did produce a video recently where I compared the steel finishing of a number of watches, including a Grand Seiko, a Quartz GMT, and actually the finishing on that watch was fairly average, and that has still the factory finishing. So yeah, in some respects, their finishing is all it's cracked up to be, but in others, it is just fairly average. So that, in a nutshell, is my 5 years of Grand Seiko ownership. Some real highs buying it, just incredible. Love it, love it, love it. Wore it lots and lots and lots. My unbelievable low, handing it to some random in the pub who then just smashed it up. Yeah, I'm probably exaggerating a little bit, but of course, when you own the watch and you see it with all these dents and scratches, it is gut-wrenchingly painful to see, but then having it refurbished, yes, paying £700 for the privilege, but yeah, now enjoying the watch again, I am loving it. So I do recommend Grand Seiko watches. You just have to be prepared for them to get scratched, get damaged. Of course, you're going to be a little bit careful with it. And yeah, I think you'll thoroughly enjoy it if you are in a fairly privileged position to pick one up. And yeah, they're not the cheapest, but wow, they are good. Oh man, what a journey. What a journey. I've loved owning it, and I've no plans to sell it anytime soon. So yeah, I'm sorry you're not going to see this one on eBay or on my website. And maybe in another 5 years, I'll give you another update. Hopefully it will have been a much smoother one. Right guys, as always, a massive thank you from me to you for tuning in. I do appreciate it. Any questions, let me know.